right, joining us now from Oka is the Police Force Public Relations Officer, Commissioner of Police Frank Anambra. Frank, glad to have you join us on News Night. Glad to have you join us, like I said. In addition to the 24-hour restriction, what other security measures have you put in place to forestall any sort of trouble at all?
First of all, let me say good evening to our viewers, and it's always a pleasure serving this country. Like you've rightly captured, in addition to the 24 hours restriction of movement that we are imposing, there'll be a lot of other arrangements, operational arrangements that will be put in place, and in addition to those that are already in place, to actually guarantee the safety of everyone that will be participating in this election. And first of all, I need to explain the rationale behind the restriction of movement, because it certainly will be causing a lot of inconveniences to our citizens, and we appreciate that, and we are calling them to please understand with us, cooperate with us, and see the restriction as part of the collective sacrifices that we are all making to protect our democracy.
Let's talk about the issue of adequate training for thousands that you're deploying to Anambra State, about 35,000 police officers. Correct me if I'm wrong. What kind of training are you giving them in terms of how to engage with the civil public, and more importantly, their welfare, to ensure that they don't compromise or they don't, become vulnerable to those who may want to induce them financially or by other means?
Well, the two key points you've made have been thoroughly covered. Those are two key fields to us. The Inspector General of Police, in the build-up to this election, engaged professionals, not just from the police force, but also from outside the police force, including members of the civil society organizations, to conduct very robust and comprehensive training programs for police officers that have been deployed for this election. There were a lot of in-house trainings that were also conducted, and even while they are here in Oka, where we are today, we've also organized a series of lectures for them. And remember, this is not the first major election that we'll be policing. We'll be policing the Nigerian electoral processes since 1999, unbroken for this number of years. And for every election we've policed in this country, it has been a key learning point for us. At the end of every elections, we consolidate everything. We usually carry out a post-mortem analysis and select those things we did very well, consolidate them into best practices, and then go ahead to continue to improve on those areas where we believe we did not do well. And so in this election, you will see improved performances. Our police officers have been trained in areas such as emotional intelligence. They've been lectured on the electoral laws. They've also been taught on how to respect the fundamental rights of Nigerians, particularly members of the public who will be turning out to vote. They also have been lectured on how to communicate effectively and engage proactively with members of the public. And on the issue of the welfare of the officers, I want to say this clearly, that the Inspector General of Police, IGP Usman Alkali Baba, took this very seriously, and as I speak to you, most of the officers who are participating in this election have already been paid. They've received their allowances, and the good news is that the allowances they are receiving this time around is actually an improved version of what they've always been receiving. So we are primed for the best. We've trained, we've prepared, we've deployed effectively, and we are covenant with the people of Anambra State is to deliver for them, deliver unto them a level playing field, remain politically neutral, and work with all relevant stakeholders to ensure that this election comes and goes peacefully.
To hear you reel out preparations, there's one thing to prepare, is another thing in the field. The IGP talked about supervision, and one is interested how you are going to carry out the supervision of your men on ground to ensure that they don't go overboard and that journalists covering this election, they are not harassed in any way.
Well, the truth here again is the fact that we understand the dynamics of policing an election. And that's why today we did not just invite the journalists for a briefing. We also provided an opportunity to interact with these journalists and get them to meet some of the commanders and the field supervisors who will also be working on the field on the election day. We provided them with personal phone numbers of most of these commanders so that they can also develop beyond the control room numbers, beyond the distress numbers, for them to also have a personal interaction with these officers. So I can tell you, the journalists are key participants in this election, and will not just be concerned about their safety, we'll also be making sure we provide an enabling environment for them to be able to do their work undeterred and unhindered. We are concerned about everybody in this election. Beyond the journalists, we'll also be providing adequate security for INEC officials and INEC materials. We are concerned about our election observers, whether they are local or international. We will be providing specialized security arrangement and priority to persons with disability, aged persons, pregnant women, persons who have challenges with their health. They will receive priority when they come out to vote, and we will provide specialized security and care for them. And so we are primed for the best, and we will give you the best. And for police officers who will be participating in these elections, I've said that in other fora that, look, we understand the challenges of these deployments, and so we have also put in place adequate measures to ensure that we advance the benefits of this mass deployment while suppressing the mischief that could be associated with this kind of mass deployment. And we are also, beyond deploying the policemen, we will also be deploying another layer of supervisors, police officers who will be charged with the responsibility of policing the policemen themselves to ensure that their conducts are in line with international best practices and our standard operating procedures.
All right, very, very interesting points you make there. But let's look at this massive deployment of about 35,000 to Anambra. This will not be the first election where you have this, a huge number of deployments. And I'm wondering, how exactly does it affect the overall, policing operations in other parts of the country while this election hold, whether in the case of Anambra that's coming up on November 6th? Is there any kind of burden that it, gives to the police? And what's the police attitude or response to IPOB announcing a suspension of the sit-at-home order?
The truth is that when you have an off-cycle election, you have the benefits of having extra hands and extra resources. When we conducted our security threat analysis for Anambra State election, we identified key issues. For instance, because it's an off-cycle election, and because Anambra State has got borders with about 6 states, Kogi State in the north, Enugu State in the east, Edo Delta in the west, and Imo Rivers and Abia in the south, we identify a potential risk associated with free hands, political thugs, criminal elements who are on the criminal bench and waiting to just make an influx into the state. And that again explains part of the reason why there is a restriction of movement. And so for us to be able to police these borders, police the entire space effectively, we had to deploy that kind of numbers. And we did that kind of deployment again, like I said, because we had a luxury of the resources, both material as well as human. And I will tell you, ND, the honest truth is that even the media also deployed heavily. I can tell you, if this election was taking place in about 5 states, you wouldn't have one single media house deploying 10, 20, 30 journalists here, because you will spread your resources. But when you have just one off-cycle election, you need to dominate the scene, you need to make sure you provide adequate security, you need to keep criminals who are floating in other states around the states, you need to be able to keep them in check, you need to make sure you block all entry and exit routes to ensure that there is no free flow of weapons, drugs, and any other thing that could subvert the electoral processes. But we understand the dangers in such deployment, and the Inspector General of Police, in one of his outings, did explain that there are indeed advantages and disadvantages. But what we do here is to put adequate measures in place to advance the advantages and suppress the disadvantages associated with such deployment. But for purposes of this election, we'll give you the best, and the best you will get.
All right, thank you very much, Frank Anambra, Police Public Relations Officer, speaking with us live from Awka.